Yeah, the world is fundamentally changed. And I know a lot of people have said that. Let me get really concrete about it. Really, there's three different worlds slash types of truth. So there is the physical world. And it's governed by physics. It worked the way that it worked even before humanity existed. Then there's the world of society and community, where within, interrelations with people, we can set up particular ideas. Like the economy is basically an idea. It didn't exist, before humans existed and kind of decided to work together in a particular way. This is the layer that's going to get disrupted a huge amount during this time period. And it's actually the one that we kind of think about the most when we think about whether life is normal or not. And then the third layer is basically personal truth and personal life. So within oneself, what is true. Now, I think what has been problematic is that we've built a type of middle layer, which is not really in concert with the physical layer of nature and reality, and isn't totally in concert with, from the social justice side, of personal truth for the majority of the world. And I think like the oppression of women, for example, just straight out, more than half the population is women. And yet, from the personal truth side, we do a bunch of things that, as a society, that are not in concert with that. So I do think there's going to be a very significant need to go rewire that central piece in terms of what is society and community, how is it organized, what are the basic rules? Because a lot of what we've been doing around that, which is, there's a big chunk of it which you can think about as the sphere of capitalist organization. So the reason that we're so fragile right now is we basically went for maximally efficient global supply chains. And when you do it that way, efficient is basically a synonym for fragile. I think there's a lot of folks that are like, okay, well, it's the end of capitalism then. But I don't really look at it like that. It's too much of a binary switch. I think that if you think about capitalism as a type of tool, as opposed to an ideology, which we've been treating it as an unquestionable ideology, if you look at capitalism as a tool, it's a tool that can be useful in some places for some things, specifically to use competition to make something efficient.
Right.
And there are some types of tasks in the world for which that tool is really useful, but it should not be treated like an ideology. Earlier in the conversation, I was talking about these three layers of reality that we are existing in. So one of them is the physical reality of the world, of which science is the best way to go make sense of it, right? We can understand, how the planets go around the sun. We can understand, how these tiny natural processes work. We can understand the function of a virus or a bacteria that is, spreading around the world. And what's happening here is the realm of society and community is basically trying to assert its sensibility of truth over everything else. And I think that can be fine if it has a deep respect for, well, I'm going to assert some things about nature, but I'm going to be curious enough about nature that I'll just make sure that they're true before I make that into economic policy, environmental policy, etc. But what happens sometimes is within the space of that second chunk society, we also have this concept of power. A way that we've organized power where people will kind of enforce ongoing rules for society, which may not be in concert with personal truth, may not be in concert with the truth of the environment or the physical world. So on the personal truth side, you have the entire civil rights movement. You have women's rights, minority rights, LGBT rights. And it's like, well, look, there's personal truth here. And then society doesn't like that. Thinks it's a danger for women to vote. Thinks it's a danger for schools to be integrated. Thinks it's a danger for queer folks to get married. And therefore, let's exert our power and pretend that those things aren't real. Let's pretend your personal truths aren't real so that we can go advance something. What we're getting relative to the pandemic in science is that same sort of sensibility asserting itself on nature. It's like, well, let's pretend we're not poisoning the rivers. Let's pretend the virus works in a way that it's different than the way that it works. And The problem with this kind of central thing, central type of truth, trying to dominate the other types of truth, is that it just doesn't stand. Well, I think that we're going to have figured out a lot of this stuff in 100 years. And remember, 150 years ago, medicine was just putting leeches on people. So like we can absolutely go and like balancing humors. So like we can absolutely make some real progress in 150 years. So if you scoot forward 150 years from now, I think some of the things that we've been talking about in this conversation are just, head-smackingly obvious, that you can't go entertain a type of truth that doesn't work with natural truth, that intrinsically oppresses people. Like, that's a head smacker. Like, we'll look back on our civilization at this point and be like, how could we even believe that the stuff that we believed back then? How could we think like the leechers and the humors and the, a phlegmatic personality or whatever was a thing? Like, that's a head smacker. And similarly, 150 years from now, it's like, how did they think that by oppressing a bunch of people that their society would be healthier? How did they think that just ignoring, the functions of nature and designing an economy was going to work at all? And it'll be head smackers. So in a way, like we won't even be heroes. Like anybody that's working on this stuff now, they'll just look at us as the people that stopped being head-smackingly dumb.
The Boldly Now Show, igniting the world of burning desire, big ideas, and bold action.